Hello there, and welcome to Tales of the Force, a place for fans to tell their Star Wars stories. Joining me today is Andrew Hess. Andrew has been a Star Wars fan since 1983. And then in 1999, he installed a sound card on his parents' computer just so he could play X-Wing with sound. He's never been to Tattooine, thinks Hoth could be too cold, and Coruscant too crowded. But he wouldn't mind visiting Scarif, or maybe not, depending on the timeline, I think. We'll get into that a little bit later. He doesn't have a blog or a podcast for me to recommend to you, but we both hope that you really enjoy his story and us just having fun talking about Star Wars. Don't forget, this is Andrew's personal story. It's not my place on the show to dismiss, diminish, judge, or have an opinion on his story. Any views, thoughts, or opinions expressed are his own. Any comments on this episode and story are expected to be respectful. With all of that out of the way, please join me in welcoming Andrew to Tales of the Force. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I know this isn't like a reaction show or a ranking type podcast or anything like that, but just overall, have you liked the new show, Acolyte, that's coming out?
I have not watched it yet.
Okay.
So my family and I just got back from vacation
Oh,
this
nice.
Sunday, and we haven't watched it yet. I might actually go watch the first episode with my wife right after we finish this recording. So
Awesome.
I'm
Well, I hope
excited
you
though.
enjoy it.
Heard strong positives so far. Also, I mean, you can't be in the fandom and not hear the negativity,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I mean, if people are complaining about a lightsaber whip, we've had those. They've been in the books. It's fine.
Yes. That is so true. And I've talked about it on here before. I'm totally fine. Like, if somebody doesn't like something and if they have like a reason why they don't like it, I'm like, cool, that doesn't bother me. But if that's something for you, then that's valid for you and help me understand where you're coming from. And I can try to, if people want to know, understand where I'm coming from something.
You can triangulate now, which is so interesting to me as a longtime fan. So I started with Return of the Jedi in
Yeah.
1983. So I was 4 years old. I had an ear tumor, and I was not happy to go to the hospital to have that
Oh,
removed.
gosh.
So one of my literal first memories of anything is my dad sitting next to me at the theater reading Jabba's subtitles on the big screen. And then you have nothing from 1983 to 1999 when The Phantom Menace comes out. So my generation, I'm a little bit older than you. My generation, Star Wars was still underground a little bit. It was still the
Mm-hmm.
geek culture. It was the nerd culture. You know, especially I grew up Midwest Ohio, small town. It wasn't popular the way it is now.
Yeah.
Now it is the culture. You know, in a lot of ways, geek culture, whether comics, sci-fi, nerd stuff, that's the dominant culture. And we've gone from a place where you had to beg to get it and to hunt for it to it's inescapable. And I
Yeah.
saw someone say today on Threads, and I wish I could remember who it was because I'd like to attribute it to them. Star Wars is like a buffet now. You don't have to eat everything at the buffet. You can pick and choose what
Yes.
you like, what you don't like. You can leave for other people, but there's so much of it now, and it's exciting, and it's also kind of like shocking to someone in my generation.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it was over. You
Hmm.
didn't think you were really getting anything else. And I mean, honestly, like after the prequels came out, I never thought we would get anything really past that. And I didn't really even know somehow, I don't know how I missed it, but I somehow went my teenage years, childhood, depending on when it came out, not even knowing about the animated shows. So I didn't
Hmm.
really even learn about those until I was adult and obviously love them. But yeah, I didn't really think we would get anything until, the deal went through and we're like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. When the House of Mouse bought the House of Lucas, like everyone knew
Yes.
we're going to get more,
Yes.
because you don't spend that much money and not try to recoup some of the costs. But that was what was a very interesting time because you didn't know what you're going to get, and so many people were like, "Oh, they're going to tell all the stories from the books, and we're going to get Mara Jade, and we're going to get Thrawn, and we're going to get Jorah Saboth, and all these other characters." And well, we've got Thrawn now, um, but a lot of them aren't, and for better or worse. Those
Yeah.
extended universe books that, here's a quick plug for you. Go to your local library and read the books, request the books, because there's a lot of fun that you can have. And there's some
Yes.
really good audiobooks too for when you're done listening to podcasts like this one, that actually have sound effects, and like the
I love
actor
them.
Dennis Lawson that played Wedge, he uh, narrates a whole bunch of the audiobooks. So there's a lot more Star Wars that's not just on Disney Plus that you can track down and
Mhm.
enjoy. And even if it isn't canon anymore, it still adds to the story. It still gives you different perspectives. If you want to
Yeah.
go to the whole a long time ago in a galaxy far away aspect, that means you've got an unreliable narrator. And all of these stories can be true from a certain point of view.
Yes. Yeah. And I love when people have talked about too when like they not to give anything away for people who haven't, but that there's a little bit of a difference, between in Tales of the Jedi and the Ahsoka book. And
Mm-hmm.
people have made the point, you know what, that's kind of okay because one, the creator of that is the one that made the changes. And then two, um, it's a different viewpoint,
Exactly.
and we all kind of see things a little bit differently and remember events a little bit differently. And that, yes, there is truth kind of hidden within there, but it doesn't really make like your experience any different. And so I think that's an interesting thing to think about as well when you look at the stories, or if there is a little bit of a difference that's not, completely altering to something major. It is kind of a point of view. And I think that is important. And obviously, like, we don't want them using that too much to where it's like overused and it's like, oh, here we go again. But it is a true thing, even in real life.
Yeah. I
So
mean, as long as you don't tell the same story over and over again, as long as you keep expanding to it, I think it's great. Like, if you're recording this and you can see over my shoulder, I've got a bunch of comic book figures on the wall. Those stories change, they get retconned constantly, and people will complain like, "Oh, this ruined my childhood." And it's like, no, it doesn't. Like, your childhood, you still had it. It was still hopefully a good childhood, and now this can be someone else's childhood, and it gives you that chance to compare and contrast and say, when I was 10, this is how this character was portrayed, and now this is what they're doing with them when you're 10. And
yeah.
here's why I liked it. Here's why I didn't like it. Tell me why you liked it. Tell me why you don't like it. Having those conversations, that's where the fun is in the fandom. Like, I think that adhering to canon or demanding absolute canon accuracy in all things is one of the worst things you can do as a fan, because you're gatekeeping at that point. It's like you're saying,
Hmm.
this was mine. This is how it needs to be all the time, and I will accept no changes. Make the changes, tell a good story. And like I said earlier, it's a buffet. There's more now. There's always going to be more Star Wars. There's always going to be more stories that you can engage with and enjoy. And it doesn't have to be the movies. It doesn't have to be the books. It can be the video games. It can be the role playing games, anything.
Yeah, definitely. So it was the movies, though, that kind of got you into it with Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And that was your first theater experience, right?
First one I can remember. Yeah. And had to
Yeah,
have been, because I would
yeah.
have been 4. I don't think there would have been much earlier.
I think I saw Beauty and the Beast in theaters when I was a kid, but I don't remember that. And I think the first movie that I remember in theaters was Aladdin. And I just remember like the magic carpet ride just being like when he's going through the Cave of Wonders, just
Mm-hmm.
blowing my mind. As
Yeah,
you
that was a
know, like
great
I don't
sequence.
remember how old I was, but in theaters, I was just like, oh my gosh, as a kid, because it's moving around and
Oh
going up
yeah,
and down. And it was like a ride.
it was. It like that's one of those that you sometimes would go back and watch it from the front row just so you could like go up and down and go nuts with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But,
I,
but
I
yeah,
love that they're bringing stuff back into theaters, like having the Phantom Menace come back out
hmm
and seeing it. It's just like, yes, we have great TVs and great surround sounds and great things that you can put in your house. And that's wonderful, but there's just something about seeing a Star Wars movie in theaters that's just like
the right
it's I don't
movie
know.
at the right
Just
theater with the right crowd, it's
yeah.
magic. It really is.
Yeah.
And like I'm
Yeah.
not trying to. I mean, obviously we had COVID, we had a bunch of theaters shutting down and having to shut their
Yeah.
doors, and now more and more places are releasing direct to streaming. But like, if you get that perfect mix, it is so worth the price of the ticket. And usually a Star Wars film is, or the right
Mhm.
horror movie even.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're just like I don't know. It's just a different fun. It's a different fun experience that you just can't get
No,
really
and like
outside
you
of it.
said, re-releasing. When I was in high school, I was my senior year. I graduated. The original trilogy came back through the theaters, and that was when they did the special editions.
Uh huh.
So that was such a fun experience too, because again, it was something that again there was that 16-year gap almost where there's no Star Wars in theater, where it's and of course, we didn't have good surround sound. We didn't have good screens. We had
Yeah.
27-inch console TVs that weighed about 500 pounds and might have had two speakers. So there's a trailer, like if you look it up online, of when like the X-wing is coming towards the screen. It's this tiny little pinched-in screen, and then it shoots through the screen and goes widescreen. And it's like you know,
It's
see A
the
New Hope
difference.
in theaters again, and you're just like, oh, yes.
That's the one that I have not seen it in theaters, and it's my favorite Star Wars movie. Like I've seen it in like one of the Star Wars in concerts,
Hmm?
which was amazing, with the live orchestra. And so I mean that's on a big screen, but I haven't actually seen it like in a theater, and
Yeah.
I would love for that to happen
That's
because
another
it's
one
it's my favorite.
I would say definitely worth it. It's funny though, like you used to be able to do, the Star Wars theater marathon, and some places would do it, and it was 3 films, 7, 8 hours, and you're out. And now it's 9 main films, Rogue One and Solo, maybe some other stuff thrown in. You're looking for 24 hours in a theater these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some places did that over May the 4th with
Hmm
the release of The Phantom Menace, but not anywhere close to me. I don't ever get I don't ever get that where I live. So it's either I would have to drive, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 hours to get somewhere close, I guess, relatively.
hmm
To do that. Like even like when they do the releases of the shows sometimes in theaters, that's like never in my area either. But
Sure.
I enjoy seeing other people have fun getting to go and do that because it is a really fun experience.
It's a cultural touchstone. It's a blast. And like I remember even when the prequels were coming back out, well, not back out, but when they were first released, people lining up in Jedi robes and Sith robes around the theater, and it was just like again, it was a shock to me to see because there was nothing for so long. It wasn't. It was almost hidden, and then it came back, and it's still going. Um,
Yeah.
and there was the other interesting thing about all that is I think Phantom Menace hit right when we started to get fast internet everywhere and webcams everywhere. And it was very interesting because movie criticism went from something that only happened if you were Rogers and Ebert to anyone could do it. And suddenly people latched onto talking about Star Wars online. And
Mhm.
the conversation moved from nowhere to everywhere. And like now, you and me, hundreds of miles apart can even do this and send this out. And when I was growing up, we didn't have that. Like if you had one friend in elementary school that also liked Star Wars, you got to talk about Star Wars when you went over to his house for his birthday, and that was it. And now it's ubiquitous again. To go
Yeah.
back to that word, you can talk to anyone. You can have this global, rapidly connected, quickly conversing community. Which, if you find the right crew, if you find a great group of people that get along with you and share your opinions on it, it can be pretty rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. Or people that are respectful. Even if you have a little bit of disagreements, but it's not, there's not gatekeeping involved or name calling or, some kind of status card for if,
Exactly.
somebody has one opinion over somebody else. Because I've always been someone that outside of even Star Wars, I've always surrounded myself with people that we're all a little different and we all have different life experiences. And because of those life experiences, we have some differing opinions on things. And I've always enjoyed that, even though some people run from that as fast as they can. I've enjoyed it because it's kind people that I'm around. It's
Hmm.
not, again, egotistical or it has to be this way. It can't be a different way. But like, I guess I don't want to say open minded. That just seems kind of like a bland blanket statement, I guess. But people that are willing to listen to other people and talk about different things and do it in a kind and respectful way. And that I love that because it's
Yeah.
challenged me as a person. It's helped me to grow as a person. And it helps me see things from a different perspective, kind of like we're talking about that different point of view. Like
Hmm.
it does help me see things from somebody else's eyes. And even if it's not my experience, even if it doesn't maybe resonate with me as much, or I might be like, I don't know about that. Like I at least can understand and value that person and their opinion and why they got there. So
I absolutely agree. And I think that a lot of my generation's fandom, we need to grow out of that locked mindset. Like, we're the ones that kind of led the charge on the prequels are terrible and no one should ever watch them and they've ruined our childhood and stuff like that. And like for me, the change with that, because originally when Phantom Menace came out, I was not impressed. I
mhm.
there's changes I would make. I don't think it's a bad movie. I used to say before he sold to Disney, like if I had the money, I would take the Phantom Menace, keep every image the same, change a few lines of dialogue, and it would snap. It would be perfect. But I was in Target around Christmas after Clone Wars came out, or Attack of the Clones, I mean, came out. And I'm walking through the toy aisle because I love my toys, and I see these two kids, and they must have been like 7, 8 years old, and they're looking at the Star Wars figures, and one of them goes, "Oh, that's Anakin. He's my favorite Jedi." And two thoughts race through my head right behind each other. The first one is, "You little fool, that's Darth Vader. He's the biggest villain in the galaxy. What are you doing?" And the second thought was, "No, this is his Star Wars. This is this generation's story. It's not up to me to tell him how to like it or not like it. It's up to him to enjoy it." And he can grow up with having the memories not of watching the original trilogy and then going back and seeing the prequels, but seeing the prequels first and then maybe the original trilogy and then maybe whatever comes next. But it's not up to me to
Mhm.
tell him how to like something or how not to like something. And that's been a really big, I don't know, gift to myself with regards to the whole fandom, and not just with Star Wars, but with other fandoms too. Again, comics, movies, stuff like that. It's not yours to own and to dictate. It's yours to enjoy with people and hopefully find out, what about this do you like? What about this is rewarding to you to watch or to interact with? Tell me that so I can tell you my version and we can have the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I've said it again. I've said this already and sorry for repeating myself,
No
but
problem.
like I remembered the treatment that we had as kids for liking the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing the shift between, like, I was maybe the only girl, honestly, that I knew growing up that liked Star Wars. And so mostly the people around me that were my friends that liked it were guys. And I remember seeing that shift of, if you like Star Wars and you're cool, you don't like the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing my friends, that some of them I could talk to about these movies as we got older, all of a sudden be like, "Oh, those are stupid. I don't like them." Like, "No, no, no, no. We can't like those," you know? And so I remember seeing that change in other people, and I remember feeling silly, I guess, for liking them a little bit. Like, I liked them anyway, but, like, there was definitely that impression. And so when the sequels came out, I remember having this, like, mental conversation with myself and saying, "You might not like these. You
Yeah.
might hate these. You might not like anything about them, or you might love them. You might like part of it. You might like some of it, or whatever. Regardless, you are not going to do the same thing to the kids that are going to go see this
Mm-hmm.
as you felt like happened to you." And it makes me sad when I see people that say, like, I was bullied for liking the prequels, turn around and in kind almost bully the next generation for liking the sequels. And it's like, it's fair. If you don't like them, that's fine. Like, it's totally fine if you don't like
Mm-hmm.
them. I mean, I have friends that hard disagree on the sequels, and we can talk about it. Again, it's the same group of people. Like, we can talk about things that we like and what we don't like. And while I think there's like a pro and a con to that, because I think when you tell people your cons, it almost opens their eyes to seeing flaws that maybe they didn't see. And so, like, you kind of have, I don't know, it's a weird balance because, like,
Cons are usually easier to engage with too. It's easier to talk about
yeah,
what you don't like than what really clicked for you sometimes.
yes, yes. And so now I'm learning, though, I think as an adult, to say, I see that flaw that you're
Mm-hmm.
pointing out, and that's a valid thing if that's important to you, for you to say, this could have maybe been better. It
Yeah.
doesn't personally bother me in the grand scheme of things. And that's kind of like how I've been learning to say, like, you are probably right. That probably is an issue, like, if you're looking at whatever it is, but it doesn't bother me. So,
How much of an issue
like,
is it to you? Like, does
yeah,
one
yeah,
of my biggest, like, oh my gosh, with the fandom is fuel in The Last Jedi. So
yes,
I loved The Last Jedi, and people came out of the woodwork to complain about, oh, they're out of gas. They've never talked about gas in Star Wars. And I'm like, yeah, the entire fuel up the X-Wing scenes before the trench run in episode 4, that was fuel they were putting into the starfighters. They haven't talked about it in any other movie because it hasn't been an issue, but in this one, they're on the run and they didn't have time to fuel up. Done.
yeah,
But it's like, some people just like find that one little nitpick to grab onto it and can't let it go. Like, my wife and I watched Aliens versus Predator, which is a terrible movie, but it's a bad movie for a lot of reasons. But the reason she was mad at it is because they were on an ice breaking ship in the Antarctic Circle and there wasn't steam coming out of anyone's mouth when they were talking. And that took her right out of it. And it's
mhm,
it's so funny to me because, yeah, it's not the best movie in that series by a long shot, but that's her one complaint.
yeah. Yeah, we all have those things that kind of bother us to an
Mm-hmm.
extent about that. And I think it is a taste thing, you know? It is like, I don't know, just remembering that art is subjective, and
Mm-hmm.
just like different things aren't as important to us, different things aren't going to be as important to the director or the writer or the producers or the post-production or different things like that. And so things are things are things are going to be missed.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's a coffee cup ending up in a screen or an orc
The
answering a
Starbucks of
phone, you know,
Winterfell.
a
Yeah.
cell phone. Like, things happen. So it's just, it's one of those things. But I've gotten so many more positive things and help in life, honestly, from Star Wars than anything negative. And so it more than is worth being a part of my life because of that.
Absolutely agree. And that's one of the reasons I love your show. And I admit I haven't listened to all the episodes yet, but I feel like you've
It's
done
okay.
such a good job of focusing on the positives of the story and how it positively affects people's lives, but also like you've been so open about the ADHD struggles and stuff like that. And I know you in May you had a mental health guest on, and you're talking about how you can use Star Wars to help with mental health and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
all that stuff is like it's the absolute best part of the fandom. It's coming together to share stories, tell positive things, and reinforce each other. So kudos to you, if nothing else, for
Well,
that. And
thanks.
don't let any bullying about Phantom Menace take that away from you.
Well, I haven't had any yet, knock on wood.
Good.
So that's been good. But yeah, so talking about our stories in Star Wars and how it
Mhm.
has affected us, how has Star Wars kind of gone through your life? I mean, I know kind of where your entry point was and the different things that you enjoy, but what has been kind of the important parts of it, I guess, for
Oh,
you?
I do kind of blame Star Wars for a rough relationship with my dad. I know, like I talked about him reading the subtitles to me, but if you look back at early media, parents were either the moms were usually dead and the dads were usually evil growing up. So for whatever reason, I like really twigged on to dad was bad because of Darth Vader. So we did have kind of a rocky relationship, but just like the end of Jedi, we've patched it up and moved on. And like having kids of my own has really, I think, opened my eyes to a lot of like why your parents and you
Mhm.
butted heads when you were the kid, and then you see it again and you go, oh, this is why dad was frustrated. This is why dad was
Yeah.
angry. I'm gonna not do this so that
Yeah.
my kids don't grow up thinking I'm Darth Vader. Um, but yeah, it's so weird. And like, I've got this little R2 behind me that's a Lego set that my wife and kids got for me for Father's Day a few years ago. And out in the screen porch, I've got a giant, like 4 foot tall R2D2 cooler that my dad found for
Oh,
me at an
awesome.
auction. So yeah, like it's come back through that. I haven't gone to any Star Wars conventions. I do have Origins nearby where I live, which is a board game convention, and there's a lot of stuff there.
Okay.
So if you're coming to Origins this summer, maybe I'll see you. But I did get to go on a Star Wars cruise on one of the Disney boats with my family, and that was amazing. So we've done. My
That's
wife and I did a
awesome.
cruise for a honeymoon. We took their kids on a quick one to see if they would be good cruise travelers. There was no seasickness, nothing like that. So we were like, all right, Disney time. Uh,
Yeah.
and we saw the Star Wars cruise, and it was like, this is the perfect thing. And I growled at Chewbacca. He growled back at me. We we did a meet and greet with like the R2 and 3PO, and I
Mhm.
wish my wife had taken a picture of me because she says like I came around the corner, I saw them, and my jaw just dropped because it was like they're standing in front of a backdrop that looked like indoor, and I was just like,
Yeah.
there they are. Oh God. And like I got emotional. It was funny. My
It takes
oldest,
you back. It
it
really
does,
does.
like seeing them in real life, especially like done as well as a Disney Imagineer or hospitality industry can do this stuff is
Yeah.
just like they're flawless. So if anyone's listening that has the means and has kids that's thinking about doing one of the cruises, I fully recommend it. This is a non-paid plug, but if Disney would like to sponsor me, I will take another set of tickets. But yeah, it was great. My oldest met Vader and like smiled up at him, and they did like the dress up on the boat. And my youngest was wearing the Princess Leia outfit. My oldest was wearing a Rey outfit, and just like they were ready to go to the dark side. It was funny. I was like, "You're not supposed to like him, but all right, go for it."
It's funny. Like I remember in that Star Wars like in concert
Hmm.
that I went to that was the A New Hope one. When Vader comes on the screen, everybody in the crowd, I mean, there was like probably I don't think it was sold out, but there was probably at least 10,000 people
Yeah.
in this outdoor concert venue. And this kid, because I had seats in the front, and he stood like, it was quiet, so quiet, because it's when Darth Vader is like comes out on from the hall and smoke,
Yeah.
all
The
that kind of
board in
stuff.
the Tantive. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And this little boy, it was hilarious. Literally stands up on his chair and goes, "Yes, Vader!" Literally, and everybody, I mean, started dying
Yeah.
laughing. Like, you could see that the orchestra was trying to keep it together. It was so great. And I'm like, oh
Get that kid
boy,
to the 501st
you're,
Legion.
yeah, he likes Vader. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
Like I said, that's his Star Wars. It's his experience. Good for him.
yeah,
The
it
bad
was
guys
it
always
was
had the best
great.
music and the best costumes, though.
Yeah, definitely. So going there with your family and your
Hmm.
kids as a dad, um, how has it been with that experience of introducing them to Star Wars and then kind of seeing their reactions and that sort of thing?
That is a great question. And my kids are night and day in a lot of respects. And like one of them loves the spooky stuff. Like they can't wait to see Beetlejuice this fall. I showed them the first one and they like got super into it. And the other one is she's a little bit more reserved and tough princess, I would say,
Mhm.
is kind of how that goes. So we watched the first one. We watched episode 4 and they got really into it. And then I was like, should we watch Empire Strikes Back? And my oldest was like, yes. And my youngest was like, yeah, I don't really want to. And it was, again, just this shocking bit of honesty where it's like, they're not going to have your exact love of it. They're not going to
Mhm.
have, it's not like take out of you, put into them, and off they go. They're going to come to it in their own way. And at that point, I was like, okay. So with my oldest, I'll let them, if they want to keep watching, I'll watch with them, or if they have questions about it, I'll engage. And my youngest, I'll either step back and say, you know, if you want to, we'll watch it, and if you don't, we don't have to. But I really don't want to. I don't want to force it on them. They'll
Yeah,
obviously see enough of it in the classroom with their friends and stuff like that. And if we go shopping, like she'll point out Darth Vader and like, look, there's that guy, or look, there's a starship you like. And I'm like, yep, there it is. And like
yeah,
again, they'll get me Lego sets or whatever for birthdays and Father's Day and stuff, and put them together with me, and that's all fun. But they don't have the same level of interest, and that's fine. And maybe they
yeah,
never will, or maybe there'll be a sideshow or a second set of trilogies down the road. I'm really interested in see what they do with Rey because she's supposed to get her own trilogy
yeah,
coming up. So maybe
yeah,
that'll be kind of their um, teenage years Star Wars introduction, and they'll get into it then.
yeah. You never know. Was going on that cruise, did that spark anything for them
I don't know if it
with?
sparked anything. Like they loved every moment of it. They loved seeing them. And there's a moment like when you're just on the deck of the ship in the pool, and they start playing the Imperial March, and a bunch of stormtroopers come out flanking Vader, and he points at you and says, "Give us the plans," and stalks off. And again, my oldest was like, "Oh, that is so cool," and my youngest was like, "I just want to swim."
Yeah. Can we just swim now? I want to be in the
Right.
sun, and
But
then
then
give me some food, please.
yeah, you give me the Star Wars shaped dessert. But then like they started seeing other people, like I think there was an Ahsoka character there, and there was I haven't watched the Rebels show yet, but there were two characters from that, Sabine and someone else, were dressed and
Hmm.
walking around, and like they got really excited to see them, and were just like really interested in what are they doing and what's the costume, and they look really cool. So yeah, I think they'll be interested and they'll draw that interest there from just seeing a cool character and wanting to know more about them.
Yeah, yeah. Rebels is amazing. I think it's some of the best Star Wars, honestly, out there. It's, in my opinion,
I keep hearing
it's
that, and I need to
so
make time.
good. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And it's something that maybe, I mean, obviously it's an animated show your
Hmm.
kids could watch with you.
Exactly.
It's it has some of the best character development, I think, in the franchise. You just fall in love with the characters. It's so emotional.
I hear
I think
Chopper
I've
is the best
cried.
droid.
Oh my gosh, I love Chopper. He is the best little murder droid on the face of the earth. Like it's the best. And there needs to be a count because this isn't giving anything away, but it was in one of the original movies when one of the stormtroopers like falls off of something,
Mhm.
and it's like that yell
The Wilhelm scream.
as yes, exactly. I knew there was like a name for it, and I'm like, you probably will know. But they use that a lot in Rebels with Chopper, and it's just so funny. Like it's not funny to me anytime he knocks a stormtrooper off of something. Like it's the best. I mean, he just oh my gosh, Chopper is amazing. So yes, check out Rebels. It's so good. It Again, I don't think I've been as emotional watching or cried as much watching something as Rebels. It's just, it's so good. It's so good.
I can't watch the original trilogy without bursting into tears at the end when you've got Luke
Yeah.
putting Vader's body on the pyre. I'm just like, yep, that's
Yeah.
it. Story's over. Tears. And
Mm-hmm.
it's every time I know it's coming, I know it's going to happen, and I always get choked up. And again, I think it goes back
Yeah.
to like that weird father-son relationship I had with my dad, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a deeply emotional moment now that he's having, and I am too.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you guys were able to come to a good place because
Hmm.
that doesn't always happen in those situations, sadly. And it can be a hard relationship up until sometimes before your parent passes, or sometimes it never gets resolved. And I know
Hmm.
that's very hard for people and a very difficult thing. And so it is really awesome that you have been fortunate enough to be able to have that be in a better place, and then also use that for how you want it to be with your kids.
Yeah,
I think that's important because people can take that so many different ways, and it's not always it's not always the direction and that it seems like you're going with it. So I know they probably don't know it yet, and they might at some point. Um, but even if they don't consciously ever realize it, your kids, I'm sure, will always be eternally grateful for that.
I
So,
hope so. Yeah.
yeah, I know my parents have always been very open and honest and humble in the sense that they're like, we're not going to do everything right. And we make a mistake, we're going to tell you we made a mistake, and it was, partially because of their backstory, but
Yeah.
they're, family of origin or different things like that. And so it's interesting because it's such a Star Wars thing too that they do so well. It's so much about family, and it's so much about where people come from and then what they choose to do with that. And then
Hmm.
finding a character
And
that you can
that
relate to.
generational trauma, and can you escape the wheel
Yes.
of my dad hurt me, so I'm going to hurt my kids, so my kid's going to hurt someone
Yeah.
else, versus no, I choose to break this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you have a character that is kind of the most influential for you?
I it's kind of a pat character, but I've always been drawn to Luke. I think he's
Well, Luca's great,
yeah,
so that's there's nothing wrong with that.
I just feel like it's basic. It's just an obvious choice. I will
No.
say though that like I know so many guys think, and you mentioned earlier, like I love that more women and girls are getting into Star Wars now, and it's not just a boys club. But so many people say that Han is their favorite character because he's this cool guy. And I still think the X-wing is a cooler ship than the Falcon, and I'll take that controversy and that hot take with me. but but yeah, I always love like Luke's kind of farm boy beginnings to oops, I'm the chosen one to oh, it kind of sucks being the chosen one road. And again, that the last scene that they do with him in Last Jedi, I felt was
Mhm.
like so powerful with the John Williams binary sunset score coming back in. It was just like I kind of picked up on what was about to happen in the theater right before it happened, and I like clutched my wife's arms, like, no,
Yeah.
oh no, and then again, just tears.
Yeah.
So there's so many good ones though from that original trilogy. Like I love Princess Leia. I really wish Carrie had gotten the opportunity to go out after with one more movie, but it
Yeah.
was shocking when she passed. But I remember telling someone online, like they were having a bad day, and it was like I saw her avatar was Leia from New Hope, and I was like, look, you're going through some stuff right now, but if Princess Leia can watch Alderaan get murked out of the cosmos and still go about her day and take down the Empire, you can deal with the bad DMV experience or whatever. You know, she's the poster child for bad things happened, pick it up and keep going.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading, the book The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis, is that correct?
Could be Revis, I'm not sure,
Revis.
but
I'm
yeah.
probably butchering sorry, butchering her last name. But I have been so impressed with how the little bit that I've read, it's gone into kind of that trauma
Mm-hmm.
that was like, we had this to do. I have to put this behind me and move forward, which I think when any of us are in any kind of crisis or traumatic situation, that's kind of like our fight or flight, right? And so if we fight, we kind of not grin and bear it in a sense, but we put it to the side a little bit and we move through what we need to move through. And one of the things that I love, like I said about the book, is it is kind of going into how that emotionally has affected her and
Mm-hmm.
what does life look like if this war was over? What would happen? And then as you're thinking through that, well, wait, we still have more to do. Now what does that look like? What of myself do I give for this cause versus me having a life, you
When do
know?
you
And
have peace?
so
When can you put down the scepter or
exactly.
the crown or whatever and
Yeah.
say, I've done all I can, and someone else has to pick it up and run with it?
Yeah, and then, like, her getting married without her family, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that was emotional. Like, I almost started crying as I was reading that because it is a lot, and if you've experienced a loss of a family member that you love very much, it is hard going through those next steps in life when you envision and imagine that they're gonna be there with you for. Um, but yeah, it is interesting to see kind of like after the fact what she has to deal with, her dealing with Vader being her dad, you know, all of
Mm-hmm.
that is stuff that she kind of tucks away and keeps going, which I mean I think we a lot of times have to do to get through life, but you can't do it forever.
No,
You know, or
you'd
and
like
you
to
shouldn't do it
sometimes.
forever. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard, you know, you have to take time and work through things or you're gonna majorly burn out, and then that's never fun. Never fun either. But
no.
oh, I think Luke is an amazing character, and I think he is such a great story for people to look at for inspiration, for hope, for knowing what it's like to also make mistakes or think about making a mistake and then it's almost like that decision has now happened and you're like, "But wait, that's not wait a second," you
Yeah.
know? And I loved Luke watching it. Like I never really got Han or really liked Han until I was an adult. Like I just didn't get it. I just you know, as like a young like as a girl and then as a young adult and as a teenager, I was like, "Well, he's just cocky." You know, like I
Yeah.
he was like the one person, even though in real life I never would have done this, but I never thought, "What happened to him? Why is he this way?" And it wasn't really until I was an adult that I was like, "What happened to Han? Like, why is he like this?" And
Yeah.
then the Solo movie came out, which I think is severely underrated personally.
I feel like it rushes
And
things. I think that's its
yeah,
biggest problem.
yeah,
I know they wanted to do a movie with it because it was like this is the most iconic character we can do this with, but I feel like that would have been a great series take some
Mhm.
more time, because you introduce so many good characters in there too, and like a lot of them go on to Marvel's doing a wonderful Star Wars comic run right now, and a lot of the characters from Solo show up in there. I can't remember the name
Yeah.
right now, but the woman that Amelia Clark plays,
Kira.
Kira, yeah, she
Yeah.
had a huge role in that. Um, Infus Nest and a bunch of other like really fun characters, plus the whole Darth Maul lived somehow. Somehow Maul returned.
Yes.
Like you could have done
Have you
so much
watched Clone
more.
Wars?
Not all of it. That's another one
Okay.
that like it came out when
Yes.
I was in college, and so I could get an episode in between poli sci and statistics every once in a while. And I started rewatching it again when Disney Plus came out, and they were all there. It's just, again, it's a lot to burn through and keep up
It
with
is
other
a
stuff
lot.
too.
It's a lot. There is a lot of episodes. They're thankfully like shorter.
Hmm.
Um, so if you do kind of take a little bit of time and say, well, instead of watching a 60-minute show, I'll watch 3 Clone Wars
Hmm.
episodes or something like that. That can kind of help get through it a little bit, but I'm not going to lie. The beginning first season, maybe second or so is a little harder to
It's a
get
slow burn.
through
It's a slow
as an
burn.
adult.
Yeah.
Yes. Um but it's one of those things that like when you look at where it started and then like the 7th season, it's like
Hmm.
insane to watch like how the technology has changed, like how much they did with it. Um
And I still
but
love
it
like
is
that 40s newsreel intro
yes.
setting device that they use. That's such a great touch.
Yes, it's so good. So yes, I would recommend definitely Clone Wars. It's so good. It has some great storytelling. It really enhances a lot of the characters. And that's a thing too that I try to remember with the different trilogies even is we've had over 40 years to fall in love with Leia and for her to be
Yeah.
iconic or for Luke to go through all these things, and there were so many books that were in between that time even before we knew, like you were saying, if there was going to get any more. And so people have had years to love these characters and to get depth outside of the movies with the
Hmm.
comics, with games, with books, with different things. Like even if it's not canon anymore, it was still enhancing those characters.
Right.
And so
Or seeing cool
Clone
new
Wars,
applications of the Force or the lightsabers or the weapons, the
yes.
starships. The only things I didn't
Yes.
like about the books was the joiner click. That was the one thing I could never get behind. So brain bugs didn't work for me, but everything else was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, but it like really enhanced those characters. And so while yes, there's things that I would change about some of the newer stuff, I'm like, okay, we've got to give it a little bit of time because, the prequels, look how people viewed those,
Hmm.
20 years, 25 years ago. And then now how it's grown because of Clone Wars, because of Rebels, because of different content that has
Because
come
of
out.
perspective, if nothing
Yes,
else.
that too.
Because
Yeah.
I think when you went from original trilogy to prequel, you had 16 years where people idolized, like literal put up on a pedestal, idolized every frame of those movies. And as soon
Hmm.
as something didn't perfectly align with what those idolized movies were, they started tearing it down. It almost went to like a schism at a major religion at that point, because it was like, well, midi chlorians, we don't know what that word means. Let's get rid of it. And it's like, just watch the movie. It's space wizards. They have blades that come out of nowhere. It's super cool.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
And
you have to enjoy the
that
ride.
came from Lucas. And now
Yeah.
everyone's like, we want him back. I'm like, but you didn't want him. That's
No,
why he left.
you don't want him back. You want the stories to
Oh,
keep evolving. You almost want, like, it's a big enough thing now that Star Wars can almost be the medium that you can tell other genre stories in. Like,
yeah.
what I hear about Acolyte, and again, haven't seen it yet, want to. It's almost like a wuxia martial arts film, Matrix style. So there's your kung fu Star Wars.
Hmm.
In the books, there was a book called Dark Troopers, which was zombie stormtroopers. There's your horror Star Wars. We've already got the space opera Star Wars. Casting the Andor series gave us like political intrigue Star Wars. The Boba Fett series gave us fun smack your toys together Star Wars. Mando is giving us a great Western in space Star
Yes.
Wars. Like, you've got so many different ways this franchise can go, and let's just keep pushing the limits and just keep enjoying it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fun to see the different aspects and to see people who like grew up with it and they attached to something that they loved about it and then now they're creating and they're making something and they're making it their own and moving it forward to another generation, which I
Exactly.
think is so important because if that doesn't happen, if it doesn't become something the next generation wants or can see value in or can identify with, it's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So, it to me, if there's things that you don't like, but there's things that you still like, you're always going to have those. That's great. That's not going to like go away for you. But if you're someone that wants it to continue to grow and you want it to be a franchise and a story that's alive and it's continuing, a mythos and story and lessons for the next generation,
Yeah.
it has to change. It has to grow. And does that mean that it grows away from us a little bit as we get older? Maybe. But kind of like in The Last Jedi, that's kind of what Yoda was even saying to Luke. Like,
Yeah.
they are what we
Take what
grow
you
beyond,
need
you
from this
know?
lesson and grow
Yeah.
and move on with what you need now.
Yeah. The next generation is supposed to grow past us. It's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do more than we could do. It's supposed to change. And the things that they watch is also going to kind of do the same thing. And so I think it's important to remember that it is going to be a little different. And another thing that I learned from when the sequels came out is I'm going to try to watch this through like my childhood lens in a sense of it's
Yes.
Star Wars. Yes, it's for like obviously yes, it's for kids. Adults also enjoy it. We can also learn from it and find things that we enjoy and love from it. But what would me as a kid think about this? And I think that's why a lot of times if you were a kid when something came out, like you don't see all those flaws that you would see as an adult because you're seeing it through the eyes of a kid. You're not
Mm-hmm.
seeing it through a film critic's eyes. You're not seeing it through a, is this like storyline perfectly flowing? Like, watching the original movies, you find out, oh, just kidding. Leia's his twin sister. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. As a kid, you're like, all right, like,
Yeah.
yeah, he kissed her. That's a little awkward, but we're going to move on. Like,
Right.
as a kid, it's not this, oh my gosh, like that doesn't work. And then, when they're like, oh, Leia remembers seeing her mother and there needs to be an explanation for this. And then you see the prequels and there's no way she would remember her mother. And
No.
you're like, as a kid, you're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like cool. Like you don't really think about those things. And then as adults, like we get hung up on that. And I don't know, that's an interesting thing I've never really thought about of like the psyche of like being an adult and how we just have to like figure everything out and everything has to make sense and everything has to be perfect and work or whatever. But when you're a kid, you're
I
just
blame M.
more
Night Shyamalan.
easygoing.
And I'm only kind of kidding. Like, Sixth Sense was such a good movie, but ever since that movie with his super big twist ending, it feels like almost every movie has to have a twist ending, but also that means if you're expecting a twist ending, you're watching for how every single thing connects with everything that came before it. And as soon as you see something that's a flaw, it's cognitive dissonance. It's your brain going, this doesn't work anymore. And
Yeah.
the whole story is thrown out. But like you said, these are fantasy movies about swashbucklers in space designed for 12-year-olds. Go to the movies, turn your brain off, have fun. If you learn a lesson during that, great. But this is not, you know, high art. It's art that can take you to high places, but it's not Shakespeare with lightsabers usually.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good reminder too for all of us
Mm-hmm.
to have a break and go be a kid again.
Yes. Let your
let
let
it,
your inner
let it,
child play.
yes, exactly. Let it be something, and let the creators that are creating it, let their inner child come out, and they're
Hmm.
playing with stories. And, if it's something that you're like, I could do this better, or this should be done better, go learn how to make it be
Yes.
better, and go be a part of it if you can,
And even if you
and
can't, if you don't have $100 million to make a movie, you probably have a word processor. You can write a screenplay. You can learn how to create stuff with just the tools you have. There's
yeah,
drawing tools that you can try to storyboard with. And if it's a better story, people will find it. And if it's
yeah.
not a better story, at least you had fun creating it and you maybe learned something about how the creative process works and can take that skill elsewhere too.
Yeah, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, if you don't like
No,
it, go make it better. I
no,
just
that's
mean
it sounds
as
dismissive,
a
but it's not.
positive.
It's engage with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it like in a positive way. Like, if you genuinely think that you have what it takes to do something better, run with it.
Hmm.
Use your creativity. I don't mean it as like a negative backhanded, like in the South, bless your heart. Like, that's not what I
We
mean.
use that
Like,
up here too.
I mean, yeah, I mean, literally, like, if you genuinely think that you have the talent to do something, then use it and do it. And,
Hmm.
and use that as your motivation to make something better. Then use your love of something to motivate you to make something better. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a lot of people got started from looking at something, being critical about it, and then saying, okay, I think I can add this to it. And
Exactly.
there's nothing wrong with using that in a positive direction. And I love how there's stories like that even in Star Wars
Yeah.
too, and how it is so generational, and how I think there are core things that no matter if okay, so if Star Wars doesn't work for me, if something came out and Star Wars didn't work for me, it wouldn't have hope as like a theme that there's always hope. It wouldn't have the aspect of found family. It wouldn't have the aspect of people working together um, for a greater good. It might not be the good of the galaxy. It might not even be the good of their planet, but maybe just their community or like
Yeah.
where
Maybe
they
they start in
are.
the neighborhood.
Yeah, like those things to me are so foundational to like what Star Wars is. And I think that's why sometimes if some practical effect isn't done perfectly, or a line wasn't delivered perfectly, or written perfectly, or shot in the way that I want it to be, that isn't as important to me because I don't. Yes, that's a great part about Star Wars. And I love that. And that I love the action, and I love all the fun things and the sound effects and all of that. But that isn't what brings me back to Star Wars.
Yes. It's not the
It's
be all end
those,
all.
yes, it's those stories. It's John Williams. I don't know what I'm gonna do when he's like not doing it anymore. But like the scores, which I mean, everybody who has stepped up that has scored any of the other things, even the Kiners with the animated series, amazing,
John
great
Williams
job.
has done more for Hollywood than
Yes,
anyone almost combined. Like his
yes.
scores are legendary.
Yes, it's just so that's a part of it too. So like if the music wasn't good, it'd be hard for me to like
Hmm.
really enjoy it. And music isn't a storyline. Music isn't um an effect or a plot point or a theme, but that is an important thing to me. So
It's
that's
almost
why again, I
undeniably tied to Star Wars, though. Like the
yes.
soundtrack, the original Williams scores are so iconic to not just the movies, but the entire genre at this point. That yeah,
Yeah, and that's so I guess that's why I try to be understanding when people say this aspect of it, even if it is like a practical effect or something, is important for them to see in Star Wars because it might take them out of it. Because the music would probably take me out of it if it wasn't, up to a certain par or whatever. So I don't know. I think it's about trying to understand each other and make it better in the best way that we can with the talents that we have and the abilities that we have to, I don't know, do like
so
Star Wars and try to make it a little bit better where we can. That's such a
But
simplified, dumbed
Jessica,
down version, but
do or do not. There is no try.
yes, that too. I saw a video and oh my gosh, I cannot remember. Oh, what is his screen name? The Drip Jedi. I love his stuff. He can twirl a lightsaber like nobody's business. But he did a lightsaber video recently to Pink Song Try, I think is the name of it. And the caption killed me because he was like, Yoda would hate this song. And it made me giggle. It was so funny. I was like, yeah, he
That's
probably wouldn't
great.
like it.
No,
But even Yoda
he'd raise
wasn't
an
right
eyebrow.
about everything.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I love Star Wars and I love, like you said, that it can bring people together from miles apart to talk about it and what brings them joy and what they love and what helps them move forward in whatever part of life it
Exactly.
is. So, yeah. Is there, I guess, anything from our just kind of fun conversation that you hope people would kind of take away from listening to this?
I hope that, they can maybe take away some of what it was like to be in those gap years where there wasn't new movies coming out and we weren't as connected online as we were now, and just the differences between where Star Wars is now, where it was then, and what the fandom kind of, I don't want to say went through, because that, implies a much bigger struggle than it really was, but you know, just the differences in the amount of content that you have available to you and the amount of choices that you have to enjoy this.
Yeah. I think that's a great reminder because it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
great to get more things and it's great to have Star Wars and anytime I think we get new Star Wars it kind of feels like Christmas, but I get people being like, we don't want too much though, like make it special. Keep it special.
It's a balance. It really is.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to play with that balance in order to find
Mm-hmm.
what works. Nobody's gonna get it right. I don't get balance in my life perfectly. Like it takes a lot of error and a lot of trying something different and working through it and figuring out what works. And I'm still not at that place. And it takes time. But
It does.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I always like to ask people kind of a fun question towards the end of everything. And so, my question for you is if there was a planet in Star Wars that you could live on, one, what would it be? And two, what would your job or occupation, I guess, be on that planet?
It, that's a tough one. It's funny. Rogue One might be my favorite movie, definitely of the movies after the Disney acquisition. But Scarif
Yeah.
was like this beautiful tropical paradise that just happened to have a secret military base on it before bad things happened on Scarif. Um, so I can't pick that one because we know how it ends, but something like that, and like maybe a librarian or something like that would be cool. Hoth's way too
Maybe
cold.
like Scarif, like way pre-Empire or like
Yeah,
way
yeah.
after or
I
something.
don't know if it's still there after. I'm pretty sure the Death Star blew it all the way up.
That's fair. So
Yeah.
way before that, like
Old
way
Republic
before it.
Scarif.
There we go. That
Tor
works. And then
Scarif.
you could
That's
have
my
a
expansion
library,
pack. Yeah.
or a bookstore or something.
Yes. For the tropical beaches.
Would you be like a Jedi librarian or would you be like just like a regular,
It's so funny
like
because
would it
like
be a
even
regular
like
librarian?
saying I'd want to be a Jedi is like that feels like there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that.
So just a normal, like
Yeah,
cool
maybe
Star
that
Wars
knows a few
librarian.
Jedis that like hangs out with them, but isn't actually.
And brings you some like really cool books like on
Mm-hmm.
the down
Yeah,
low.
I don't have to be responsible for the lightsaber, but I can watch them go do cool stuff with it. Done.
There you go. I like it. I like it. Okay, so Scarif, Old Republic Scarif, and a library. I love it. That's a great answer. It's fun.
Thank you.
I didn't really know what to expect, and that was not it, but I am here for it. I
It
think
just
that's
kind
a
of
great
came to me.
answer. I love it. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on and sharing about just your story of going through this fandom and the movies and the things that you love about it and that you enjoy about it, and how we can move through this in the best way possible, without being, overly negative, but not being, toxic positive at the
Exactly.
same time, because I think both are kind of scary places to be. And also like how it's important to think about the next generation and what it's like to be a parent that's passing the baton of Star Wars to their kids if they
Yep.
want it, and being
Exactly.
okay if they like something else. I think these were all super fun things to talk about. Well, thanks again, Andrew, for coming on. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And I had such a fun time.
Me too. Thank you, and may the Force be with you.
Thank you for joining me today on Tales of the Force. This podcast was hosted, produced, and created by me, Jessica McNair, with music by Michael Hoover. Don't forget, our stories of hope is the force of this fandom, and they are a powerful ally to each and every one of us. Life creates them, makes them grow. Their energy surrounds us and binds us together. Luminous beings we all are, and not this crude matter. May the Force be with you always.